Hey guys, welcome to my wizard guide. With this one, we're gonna keep it very plain and simple because honestly, like all the way from leveling from 1 to 70 as a mage, as a wizard, it's not very complicated. And once you get to high wizard is really when it starts to get like a little bit more detailed. Even then, not so much because it's just gonna be a huge reliance on gravity field. Gravity field being the AoE skill that we get when we get to high wizard that completely ignores magic defense, is ghost property, so it's very hard to counter and makes us powerhouses. But in the meantime, because we start out as mages and as wizards, you all might be wondering, well, what's the perfect stat build? And there's no perfect stat build for general use, but the basic thing that you want to do is you want to go over here and you make sure, as you can see in my screen here, I dump everything into intelligence. Now, why do we want to dump everything into intelligence? Because we want to make sure that when we use our bolts on something, we want to one-shot them. You don't want to ever not one-shot something and that thing has a chance to attack you, and now you find yourself possibly dying because you are a squishy mage first and foremost, right? So I'm just to show you guys an example here as to why this works out. I'm going to show you my gear right now. You can see I'm wearing a +0 rod, right? +0 equipment, just basic equipment, you know, no pets, no cards, no nothing like that, no, you know, no gacha equipment in the gacha shop, for example. So this is very bare bones, right? So when it comes to stats, you want to dump everything into intelligence. Now, as you get more gear and as you get, let's say, like you get like good gacha gear in the beginning, for example, that's when you start investing into dexterity for cast time. With that said, that is our priority number 2. Priority number 1 is to one-shot our target. Priority number 2 is to lessen that cast time, so our leveling progress is sped up just a little bit, right? So now in terms of skills, I'm not gonna tell you to get a specific bolt because there really is no specific bolt that's better than anything. You want to get a specific bolt and you want to choose a leveling spot that's appropriate to the bolt that you chose. I'm not gonna tell you guys go firebolt because obviously if we all get firebolt at launch and we are all leveling at the same spots and all these other spots that are good for lightning bolt or cold bolt are like unoccupied, they wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? So I'd say pick one of your primary bolts that you're gonna get first, and then later on, as you get more skill points, you can choose to go other routes like cold bolt or like, let's say, like lightning bolt, for example. Now, some people might be curious, like, well, what about a thunderstorm, right? Like, what about fireball? These are AoE. Wouldn't AoE leveling be faster for us? Well, that depends too on your gear, because eventually, if you have, let's say, like you're heavily invested into a wizard, right? And let's say that your weapon becomes upgraded enough that fireball actually makes sense for you to level because it can one-shot packs of mobs that are closely spawned together. But as you can see, firebolt at level 10 has 1000% plus 800 fire magic damage, which does take advantage of the elemental system of the game. And as compared to like fireball, let's say like take fireball all the way up to 9, right? Now what does it give us? It only gives us 260% plus 72 fire magic damage at max, which is going to be 280% plus 80 fire magic damage, which is a far cry, absolute far cry from the 1000% plus 800 fire magic damage, right? So it's, you can kind of tell like it's going to take quite a bit of gearing up to get to that point. If you can get to that point, then absolutely, like, more power to you. You've just made your leveling progression a little bit faster, but that's what your decision making is when it comes to skills early on in general. Now, when it comes to leveling, you're going to go into your guide here, your little guidebook, right? You're going to go into your monster glossary and you can see here what level monsters are, right? When you go over here, you can see which monsters are in which element. You can click here, you can see their level up here. And a very important detail that people tend to miss as well is, let's say I'm in the zone for yo-yos right now. Now, how do I know that yo-yos will be good for me, right? So let's go ahead and go over to drops here. When you go over to drops, you're going to see like a question mark down here to the lower right. You click that question mark and then it tells you that when a monster's level is higher than yours, 1 to 5, for example, it's 110% EXP, 110% material benefits, which is huge. That's going to be a huge boon to your early currency and buying like elixirs or food buffs or what have you, or maybe potions even. Same thing with 6 to 10, 110%, 10%. Once you get to the 11 to or higher mark, then it starts to go down. It starts to degrade a bit, so you never want to go that route, right? Like, why make things harder for yourself and get less? It makes no sense. And the same thing if a monster's level is same level or lower, which is 0 to 5, 6 to 10, and it starts to degrade a little bit. So you always want to go in between these errors in where it's like 1 to 10. There's going to be some variance to that later on, but then I'll explain that once we get to actual high wizard status, because that's when it starts to make a difference. As you can see here, I'm seeing yo-yo level 30. I'm currently level 22, and as you can see from my gear here, I don't have anything special. I don't have anything carded whatsoever, and we're going to test out our damage on this yo-yo right here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cast fireball. Plus 75% extra damage, 2.4k per hit. And seeing as that Yo-Yo only has like 1.9k HP, that's a bit of an overkill. Following the guideline that I gave you, that Yo-Yo is going to be good for us for another like 6 levels, right? So once we get to level 29, we want to switch out to something else. But in the meantime, for the next 6 levels, you can actually think about spending a little bit more on dexterity, because if that was our base damage before we even get to better gear, that's how you know that like we're in a good spot right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and assign a little bit to dex. We saw that our cast time was 2.2 seconds before. We cast it now, it's now 2.1 seconds. So you can see there's like a marked improvement when it comes to cast speed, and that's generally how you want to go about it. You want to take into account that, hey, am I going to be investing heavily into this game? Am I going to upgrade my weapons pretty quick? Am I going to invest money into cards, for example? Depending on your answer to those questions is also going to depend on how much intelligence you're going to have early versus dex. And when it comes to early game weapons, obviously some people are deciding like, hey, should I get a shield? Maybe just like some extra tankiness in here. Like this shield, for example, refined shield gives me dex. Like, should I just get that instead? If you want the dex that bad, for example, you are better off going for a two-handed rod. Eventually, yes, you're going to want to be a little bit more tanky later on. If you're still in the leveling phase, you kind of want to make sure that you're able to one-shot a lot of the mobs you're attacking. And number 2, you also want to make sure that you can also invest a little bit more into dex and have more leeway into dex. So now you want to compare Oak Staff, for example, right? It has magic attack 74 in +3. But when you look at the one-handed ones here, you have your dex +2 and +1 choices, but they only give you 43 magic attack. You kind of want to start weighing that, like, hey, can I actually forego these defensive options and can I just focus on this one for now instead? And the reason why I would usually recommend going the two-handed rod as opposed to the one-handed 1+ shield is because I need you to realize that. And so the main reason why I'm actually encouraging you to go two-handed rod instead early on, especially if you're going free to play, for example, is because if you decide to opt for the one-handed rod plus like a shield, that means you have 2 gears now that you're trying to upgrade, as opposed to just having one piece of gear that you can focus on for now. And later on when you get to level 50, and that's where your Helheim dungeons start getting taken into account, and then you have your choices of staffs here. Now the choice of the staff here isn't really as impactful as it will be once you reach level 70, which is when you become a high wizard. A good thing to note is I personally I would use the Ember Staff, which does make your Firebolt skill hit a little bit harder. You can do the same thing for the Ether Storm Staff, which does make your Lightning Bolt and your Jupiter Thunder hit a little bit harder as well. But some people do prefer the Storm Staff of Darkness, which does make your global CDs a little bit faster. But the Thorn Staff of Darkness doesn't really quite become as impactful as it should be until level 70 and higher or later. So we'll discuss that in another guide once we do our level 70 to level 100 guide for each class, because right now the CBT still hasn't started. We have no idea where the meta will shift, and depending on like what patches that they apply once the game actually launches. So it's better to err on the side of caution and not give people misinformation and kind of just hold that off a little bit until we get to that point, because in Dynasty we do have a core member for each class, and each class is going to have somebody who specializes in that class, and that way we can give you a more accurate guide depending on if or when the meta shifts at that point in time, right? But for the meantime, my recommendation would be Ember Staff. This makes it so you can actually invest more into dex, depending on if you can still one-shot the mob that you're targeting. Now, when it comes to your armor, though, there's not a lot of choices that you have, but the thing that I would offer the most, because it gives me a lot of everything that I need, is probably like the Magic Coat, because it does give you intelligence +3 and variable cast time -2%, which is not the biggest deal, but it does add up. It's a lot better than going for SP consumption -10%. And when it comes to our cloak types, I would also recommend Hood, because it gives you everything that you need. It gives you some tankiness and also gives you int +3 and dex +2. And again, when it comes to boots, obviously the winning choice for me here is also magic boots. Increase your magic attack. As a mage, you're very reliant on being able to kill things before they get to you. And as for the latter part of this guide, which is the accessories, now you have like a few choices here. If you can't be picky and let's say like you get good drops for a certain accessory, like for example, you have your spiritual ring, which is what I would recommend. It's magic attack +45 and +1 dex +2, and for every +2 requirement, variable CT -1%, and if up to +10, magic attack +2%, right? That's really good scaling. And not only that, you can bring that +10 obviously eventually to your future accessories as well, and you can see how to obtain. You can either get it from Endless Tower, from the level 65 2-sake accessory custom chest, because it's really hard to get this. You have to spam MVPs, and if you end up being able to afford these by hunting enough MVP, MVPs, chances are you're just very unlucky and you get your consolation prize, which unfortunately by the time that you probably get that, the level 65 accessories will probably already be out of date, unless you're spamming these MVPs every single day, every single, like, you know, on the hour by the hour, you know, whenever they spawn, right? And the only thing too is that early on, Peony obviously is not one of the most easiest MVPs to do early on, because there's a way to tank him, and we'll discuss that in another video. We did do an NA first Peony kill in North America as Dynasty, so we will do another video for this later on. And our next choice here is for the earring, how to obtain. Obviously Osiris does have a hard cap when it comes to how tanky you have to be before you can start doing him, right? So that one is going to take a little bit. And then your next one here is your expert ring. Your magic attack plus 45, skill global cooldown minus 2%, SP consumption plus 10%. And how you get that is Mistress. Out of the 3 bosses that we just saw, Mistress is the easiest one to tank, because all you really need to do to kill Mistress is have a tank that can tank her Jupiter Thunder. And once the tank is able to do that, she becomes very easy to kill. Just keep aggro on the tank, let the tank do tank Jupiter Thunder. It could be somebody who is unfortunately a knight, or let's say it's somebody who is a very tanky wizard. His armors properly to be able to tank Mistress. Spam safety wall to tank her normal hits that still do a lot at early points in the game, and then that's when you can start farming this accessory. So this is probably the earliest and probably your best accessory when it comes to your early game. And obviously that's going to change later on once you are able to farm the other MVPs, but as of the early game, this is your best choice, right? But yeah, that pretty much concludes our early game Mage Wizard level 1 to level 1 to 70 guide. You're going to be dealing with pretty much what you see on the screen right now a lot until we get to High Wizard, which honestly, getting to High Wizard, getting Gravity Field, it makes us one of the, if not the fastest grinders in the game. And that starts very early on compared to other classes that take a while to ramp up. Once we get High Wizard, we get Gravity Field, and that thing ignores magic defense, it's Ghost Element. We are going to be the fastest class when it comes to grinding out, especially if you're invested into your class and you're able to triple spawn farm Nightmares, for example. Then you'll come to find that Wizard or High, and eventually High Wizard, is going to be one of the best classes in the game, whether you're free to play, whether you're a light spender, or even if you're a huge whale, right? So once the game launches and we all start to find out like what the meta is when we get to 70 plus, and once I see that it is still similar to what we had in NA right now, because I still play it, then I'll release the guide really quick. But if it's not, obviously I will do my due diligence. I'll do the next guide in accordance to that and make sure that you guys get the most accurate guide in 2023. And hopefully I'll catch you guys in that next video. All right guys, peace.